Easy now. Papa got this, make it hit
come down. Oh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. I'ma have to cut you off, like right now. You see, I don't want to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try the marijuana. I was loving you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they ain't finished change. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip.
Welcome to the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast, powered by The Athletic. Shout out to the company. My name is Michael-Shawn and I'm here with my co-host, Christopher Kidd. Make sure you follow us both up on the tweet machine. You guys know where to follow me. So I'm just going to go straight to the YouTube. Shout out everyone who's watching us on YouTube. Seahawks Man-to-Man on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Even if you're somebody who listens to the audio, just slide over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and come right back to Spotify or whatever. Chris, talk to him.
What is good, everybody? It's your boy, Christopher Kidd. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206. And that's CKid206.
All right, our draft coverage continues with a very, very, very special guest. He has leveled up since we had him on the show last. Very happy to have this brother on to talk. We have Jordan Reid, NFL draft analyst for ESPN. Jordan, welcome back to the podcast, man. What up?
What's going on, fellas? Happy to be back. And you guys, I'm so happy for you guys' success. And it's always a pleasure being on here.
I should have introduced you as North Carolina Central's finest. That's my bad. I wanted to get that in there, man. Because I'm introducing the show. Jordan's gonna do our quarterback episode. We're gonna try to break down different position groups, and what better to have a former quarterback, on the show, man. I know you got a lot of opinions on these QBs. This is the first time, since the Civil War that the Seahawks have needed a quarterback early. It feels like been a while. So let's dive right in. You ready, Jordan?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I want to start we'll start broad real quick. I like doing that. I talked to John Schneider about the class. I said this class isn't highly touted as previous years, and John Schneider basically just cut me off. He was like, whoa. This is a good class. When he went on this whole soliloquy about how classes are ranked and who influences that, yada, yada, yada. But where are you on the quality of this quarterback class relative to some of the previous years we've seen?
Well, I will say this. We've been spoiled with really good quarterback classes over the past few years. And what's so different about this class is that there hasn't been that one guy that's jumped out and announced himself as QB1. And over the past 3 years, we've had that guy, whether it's Kyler Murray in 2019, Joe Burrow 2 years ago, and last year, obviously, with Trevor Lawrence. We've had that guy that has just jumped out and said, hey, I'm QB1 of this draft class. Nobody else is going to be ahead of me. But this year, not only do we not know who's going to be the number one overall pick, but we don't know who the first quarterback is going to be selected. So I think that's what makes this group, quote unquote, underwhelming for a lot of people. And then it's just so hard for a lot of people to get into the draft process is if there isn't a quarterback at the top. I personally like this group. I'm not in love with this group, but I think there's some starters eventually in this group.
You mentioned you like this group, and for the most part, a lot of people don't see it that way. A lot of people are calling it a mid-class, but I want to look at something that Russ wasn't comfortable doing, and that was throwing over the middle. Do any of these top prospects or the guys that you like have that ability to spread the ball over the middle of the field and have that as a threat, especially with weapons like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few of them do. Willis isn't overly great over the middle, but Desmond Ridder, I think he's one that is probably the most consistent of the bunch over the middle. Kenny Pickett, I would argue that he's very consistent over the middle of the field too. So with this draft class, though, it just depends on the type of flavor that you like. Similar kind of the wide receivers, that a lot of these guys are so different. You have your mobile types that have strong arms. You have your mobile guys that don't necessarily have a strong arm. And then you have a combination of both, like Malik Willis. So it's just a matter of what type of quarterback that you like, and then the one that you trust as far as on that spectrum, as far as unlocking the next level of his development. And then with all these quarterbacks, it just depends on landing spot. I think that's so key, especially when you talk about not only first round, but these second and also later round guys too. You guys have had experience with Russ about how his situation was so great early on, especially with the heyday of the Seahawks, in the sense of where he didn't have to do a whole bunch just because the defense was so great. The running game was so good, of where they were just winning games with Russ. But I think what takes a quarterback to the next level is that, and I think that's what is so different about this class, is that in the NFL today, you have to have a quarterback that you can win because of, not one you can just win with. And what I mean by that is the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, those guys, you can win because of those guys. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's some guys in the league that you can win with, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff. You guys had experience with him when he was with the Rams. Those are more of the types that you can win with. So I think if you want to be the team that's in the upper tier or the upper echelons, I should say, in the NFL, you have to have that quarterback that you can win because of.
Yeah, I think the NFC West there's been plenty of case studies. The NFC West has just been so great because these teams have pushed the limit of win with. Like Jimmy G got to the Super Bowl, and almost got to another one. Jared Goff got to the Super Bowl, and both the head coaches there looked at them and said, "All right, well, let's move on from that," because it's like we just couldn't do it. They traded that house in San Francisco to go get Trey Lance, and basically traded the house as well to go get Matthew Stafford. It was like, and that's the difference. It's like there's big differences between like Stafford and Goff, but at the same time, it really is just the one guy you win because he can throw a no-look pass in the Super Bowl. And a guy like Jimmy G might throw it with his eyes closed in the Super Bowl. Like there's a difference.
It wasn't a no-look.
No,
it was not. Everybody keeps saying that. So I'm a former quarterback, obviously. So what happened with Stafford is that, and you guys will learn this as defensive backs talk to you. Defensive backs lie when they say they're looking at the eyes of the quarterback. That's a bold-faced lie. They're looking at the face mask of quarterbacks. So with Stafford, he was looking at his peripherals. He was looking at the corner of his eye. He knew exactly where he was going to go with the ball, but the defensive back was looking at his face mask. And that's why he came down on the route. But in the corner of his eye, Stafford already knew where he was going with the football. So it's not a no look, but I just let everybody ride with it. Whenever they say, I just let Stafford have his shot.
Dang, man, that makes me. That's like learning Santa's not real, man. I've been calling that a no look for about 2 months. So is that the case all the time with like Mahomes' no looks, Stafford's other no looks, quote unquote? Is it always just a face mask kind of? You know what I mean? Like you just described.
Now Mahomes is completely different. Like he'll throw the ball completely blind, but that's what makes him so good.
Mahomes,
in a sense, yeah. Mahomes is a different breed. Like he does stuff like. I coach some young quarterbacks here in North Carolina. I tell them, do not watch Patrick Mahomes just because there's only 3 people on the planet that can do the type of stuff that he does. And that's him, Josh Allen, and Aaron Rodgers. Nobody else can do the stuff that they do. So do not watch film of them just because you'll fool yourself.
I do think that's an important thing, not necessarily just about Mahomes, but just about outliers in general in sports. Like there are, like I think a lot of people are convincing themselves whenever their quarterback is bad young, they're like, oh, he can just make a Josh Allen leap. It's like, well, no. He probably won't do that. Like that's an outlier. In basketball, I think you want to tell kids not to watch Steph Curry because it's going to shoot it from half court.
And that's
like,
not good.
Kids, stop. Get your butt in the paint.
Do the mic and drill.
Yeah, like actually learn the game. That's a good point with Mahomes. You watch Mahomes, and you're like, oh, I can do that. And it's like, no.
I'm gonna try no look pass.
You're gonna be throwing it across your body.
Yeah.
Mahomes is a lot of things that would get you in trouble if he wasn't otherworldly. With his arm talent. Well, let's dig into some of these guys. Early on in the draft process, I kind of talked myself into Malik Willis, mostly because I saw like if they wanted to replicate like a cheaper version of Russ, not saying Malik will be as good, but there were some similarities I saw, good and bad. Like dude takes a lot of sacks, really strong arm, can be part of the run game, like a heavy part like Russ was early on his career. Like, I think what Malik led the FBS in sacks taken this last year. Russ is damn near up in sack percentage every year. So he's giving me some young Russ vibes. So I talked myself into him. Am I seeing that right? Are there some young Russ vibes in there?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on with that. Now, he's not quite as accurate as Russ was coming out when he was coming out of Wisconsin. But I think Malik, the thing about Malik is that his surroundings were so bad that he created some really, really bad habits as far as taking sacks, playing hero ball that I like to call. And it's kind of like he just didn't have any help out there. And he didn't play with a whole bunch of draftable guys in a sense. They probably have a running back and a receiver possibly that could get drafted in the future. But outside of that, if you watch the Ole Miss game, like it's very rare that I feel bad for a quarterback in the game. He just took a beating in that game and there was nothing he could do about it. And it's kind of like, you don't want to unfairly knock him for some of the things that he was trying to do, but he was just trying to survive out there. And that's what happened a lot of times with him throughout the season. Now he did have a bad stretch of games. I think it was like 3 or 4 towards the tail end of the year of where you were just like, man, what in the hell is he looking at right here? That happens a lot of times with Malik Willis, but he'll come back 2 plays later and he'll throw a 60-yard bomb down the right sideline, right in the hands of the receiver. So it's just kind of like you try to find that fine line with him. And that's why I said he's probably not going to be ready early on. but I think you have to have like a Jalen Hurts type of offense of what they run in Philly early on with him, where you want to get him in the quarterback design run game. You want to run him a little bit to get him comfortable in the game. But I think he can be a starter on the next level. But there's going to be some rough patches if you start him early on. But if you let him sit, you put him on like that Trey Lance type of plan a little bit, you let him sit and learn behind an entrenched starter, I think you can have a high level starter eventually.
So when I hear that, that actually makes me scared of having. This is probably why I've talked myself out of him since then. Is that Seattle's O-lines have been pretty bad for the better part of a decade. So unless they're just loading up on linemen, maybe prior to taking him, he'd be a scary pick for Seattle then, like at 9 or something.
Yeah, he would. I mean, it's great to have a mobile quarterback when you have a bad offensive line, but that can be bad for a rookie quarterback just because there's going to be some scars that he might never overcome, especially when you're talking about speeding up his process. And a lot of times with mobile quarterbacks, they try to use that mobility a little bit too much as a crutch as the physical part of the game, or the mental part of the game, I should say, catches up to the physical part. But with Malik, I'm just hoping that he can go to a situation of where he can sit for a year, just because I think it would be a disaster if he has to play right away. Like if he goes to the Panthers, it's not going to be good at all. Like it's going to be really, really bad just because they have a bad offensive line, and then they're going to need him to play right away. So hopefully he can go to a situation that helps him.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. From what I've gathered, Malik had a system where a lot of things were determined pre-snap. And if that is the case, what have you learned about his ability to dissect things and command an NFL offense, a traditional one, so to speak, where you are going to have to make post-snap reads?
He's a little inconsistent with that right now as far as reading coverages, seeing safeties where they're aligned, and just attacking coverages as far as exhausting progressions, getting to his second, third, and even his fourth option and hitting his check down. And I'll never forget, I actually wrote this down when I was at the Senior Bowl, and the Lions had him. And their quarterback coach is Mark Brunell. And Malik Willis went through an entire progression. He got to his fifth option, and he threw it to his running back. And Mark Brunell got fired up. Like I had never seen him fired up like that, even when he was playing. And just hearing Malik talk about it after practice, he was happy that I got to my running back, my fifth option, just because that's something that I didn't show a whole bunch on tape. So just seeing little stuff like that, I think he's going to have to learn on the next level. And then just identifying safeties, and then just going with what he sees out there a little bit more consistently. So what happens a lot of times with him is that he treats everything like man coverage. So whether it's a one-on-one matchup or a zone coverage, he's going to throw the ball to that dude. So I think that's something that he definitely has to clean up. So he'll have a throw. Yeah, he'll have a throw where there's a safety in the middle of the field, and he's looking at the go to the left or the right side the entire time, and he'll still throw it, and it's like a punt to the safety. He'll just catch it like this, like it's a punt, like he never sees him. So that's why I said he just sees everything like his man coverage. So he just needs to clean up some of his processing a little bit, and that comes with time. He's only been a starter for 2 years, and I think that's something that you have to take into account with him, that he's still a little bit raw at the position. So, I mean, he's a great, like, if you're a coach, he's the project that you would love to coach.
Speaking of projects, the consensus is that he might need a redshirt year. Not everybody can beat Patrick Mahomes, though, as you just mentioned. Not everybody can do the no-look pass because he is different. What exactly does Malik need to improve in that year if he's on the bench, per se?
Just learning the details and the nuances of the position, processing and reading coverages, getting through and exhausting progressions, understanding how to get to your fourth, fifth, and those last options. And then just in general, how to play the position. There's so many different things that he's yet to learn as far as being in that offense. They didn't have a whole bunch of progression-based type of things. And then also just being able to sit back and learn the actual game. That's something that he hasn't been able to do a whole bunch. He was really forced into action at Liberty. Obviously, he wanted to play there, but he didn't have a whole bunch of help either. So I'm hoping he can go to a situation of where he has some help. Like Seattle would be great from just a weapons standpoint with DK, then also Tyler Lockett, and then getting the run game back going. I think Seattle would be a good spot for him as long as they're able to fix the offensive line.
Man, it's really crazy reading a lot of these guys' scouting reports and just hearing people talk about them. How many of these offenses are just like, hey, look, your first read's gonna be open, and it's probably gonna be a 60-yard bomb, especially if you play in the Big 12. I swear, it just feels like so these not simple. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these offenses, these guys can be prolific without even having to go to a third read. You know, unless you run up against like Bama in the CFP.
Yeah, I'll never forget just hearing Deshaun Watson talk about his first training camp, and not to bring him up, but just using him as an example of where he had never called a play in the huddle before. So when he went to call the play in the huddle, he was like, what do I do? And it took him like 3 or 4 times to call a play in the huddle, just because if you think with college, everything is signal based. Everything's signaled into the quarterback. Everything is pretty much rudimentary form of where it's already laid out as far as what they need to do. The signal will tell you what side of the field to read. It'll tell receivers where to line up. It'll tell you the snap count. So he's never had to do any of that in the huddle before. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I had that same experience with obviously not as talented a guy, but it was Alex Magoo I think of Florida International, maybe.
Yeah.
In 2018, he's the only other quarterback the Seahawks have drafted since taking Russ. And he told me that during camp. He was like, yeah, calling a play is hard. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, I've never done it. I was like, this is only my second year covering the NFL. So I'm like, what do you mean you've never called a play? Like, you played quarterback for 4 years.
Isn't that your job?
He said exactly what you just said, Jordan. It's like, I didn't have to. I looked to the sideline, coach taps his elbow, and I know the whole thing. Or, it's something so simple. And honestly, that's a decent segue into the guy I've since talked myself into, which is Desmond Ridder. Because from what I've gathered, he does have some of those responsibilities. I mean, still in a college offense, but does have some of that. Like, all right, you're running a pro style scheme in that way. Just solely on that, does that give him the highest floor of some of these guys in this group?
Yeah, I think so. Him and Kenny Pickett. And it's not just an experience thing. It's just the responsibilities that they had or what they were tasked with in their offense. You see him setting protections. You see him audibling in and out of plays. You see him getting through and exhausting those progressions. And he's so good with what I like to call his process of elimination. And when he goes to that next option, and he's not comfortable with that first or the second option, you're like, okay, I see why he went to that option. Okay, I see why he went to this option. He didn't feel comfortable about it. Or if he got the ball out quick, you understand like why. There's just answers to everything that he does. And I think that's one of the better qualities about Desmond Ridder. Now, the scary thing I will say about Ridder is that just the ball placement with him is just so sporadic. Like, he'll have a beautiful throw, and then he'll come back and he'll throw one in the dirt. And it's like, man, like, what happened for you to go from doing that to throwing this pass in the dirt? So I think if he's able to clean up just the ball placement aspect with him, I think he can eventually turn into a starter.
It's accurate. I have a theory, mostly from Mike Leach, who mentioned that when I covered him at Wazoo, he was kind of the impression, I don't know if he's come off of this, that how accurate you are can only change but so much. I think his theory was like maybe something about your brain or your eyes or your timing. Like, how much do you think accuracy can improve?
It's honestly a case-by-case basis, depending on the quarterback, and it can be something so simple. Like with Josh Allen, it was just his arm angles and just his hip alignment. Like, little things like that can be so beneficial to the accuracy of a quarterback. And then the thing with Josh Allen was just everything was a fastball for him. So he, what I like to call a flamethrower, like a guy's 5 yards away and he's trying to put a hole in his chest with the ball. And it's just like, dude, just calm down. You don't have to throw it that hard. So with Ridder, more so, I think it's more of a footwork thing, and then also an arm alignment with his elbow. Sometimes he gets that elbow a little bit too high and it ends up selling on him, or it just completely goes down into the ground. So I think that's something that a lot of coaches, once again, will be willing to work on with him, just because he's so polished with so many other compartments or departments of his game that I think he eventually can be a starter. But once again, it just all revolves on if he can improve that accuracy.
Yeah, so part of the reason why I've talked myself into Desmond is because it's like the opposite of Malik. Like, I see the young Russ stuff with Malik, and I'm like, oh, maybe they want to just do a cheaper version of that. With Desmond, I see more of a guy who operates within the structure of the play, less improvising. Honestly, I'm not even going to, I think I said this when we had Danny on. Like, I saw Desmond throw some backside digs, and I was like, oh, okay, draft him then. Because it was just like the throw that Russ wasn't willing to make there. Like, how... If I'm just like looking at that part of his game, like, hey man, this guy's gonna stand in there, operate in the structure, and throw that backside dig if he needs to, is that enough for me to feel for Seattle potentially to feel comfortable? Like, hey, he can be in a Shane Waldron Rams kind of system that helped Jared Goff succeed. Like, can he do that?
And this is why I think he's going to end up being a first-round pick. Somebody's going to talk themselves into Desmond Ridder, just like what you have done, Mike, just because the floor is so high with him. And I think he's one of those quarterbacks where somebody's probably going to trade into the back half of the first round to come up and get him, kind of like a Teddy Bridgewater, in a sense, not calling him Teddy, but just talking about the situation of where Teddy got drafted. I think that could happen with Ridder. But I mean, the floor is so high with him, and then he's already walking through the door, so polished with some of the aspects that we've talked about already. You very rarely see quarterbacks going from front side to backside dig. You just don't see that a whole bunch, just because with those college offenses, half of the field is cut off in a sense, and then everything is sideline to sideline. And college offenses, how quickly can you get the ball out? How many points can we score? So it's very rare to see somebody actually going through a progression and then successfully getting through it and throwing the ball accurately like Ridder does.
Yeah, man, I don't even think it's, I know that's a college thing too, but you'll get guys in the NFL who need half field reads. I've
Yeah.
talked to guys who work with Russ who was like, some of his best stuff is that deep play action where he's reading the half field concept where, you put DK on something deep and Tyler on something maybe intermediate, and his leak out is Will Dissly or Chris Carson, and they're all within the right side of, and that's a Hall of Fame guy. That just shows you how hard playing quarterback is. Like it's just got to be like, it's so far away the hardest thing in the game. Like it's not even it's not even close. So yes, I've talked myself into Desmond. I think by the time we're done, I'll talk Chris into him.
I'm weighed up. We talked off Jordan. We all talked off wax.
We'll get to Chris's guy.
It's all good.
Let's move to another guy. In Matt Corral. Guy, if I had to pick, I'd probably go Desmond. Then this is probably Matt is where I have him. But with the thing with Matt, again, this is just kind of from me gathering scouting reports, hearing people talk about him. When he gets to the pros, does he need to be in a Jared Goff type system where it's like, all right, Matt, this is your read, hit it, it'll be open, or can he progress beyond that when he gets to the next level?
I think that's the biggest question about Matt Corral entering the NFL, just because he played in such a QB-friendly system with that Lane Kiffin system of where everything was run-pass option. Like, you very rarely ever see him going from 1 to 2 to 3. Everything is what I like to call object reads. So with object reads, you're literally reading an object. So a linebacker or a safety, if that safety comes down and run support, you're throwing the slant behind his head. If he stays put, you just give the ball to the running back. So little things like that of where everything was so object read with him. But the thing about Corral is that everything is so quick with him. He has a lightning quick release. He has really quick feet. He has quick eyes. Everything is quick. And I always say, if your feet are not good at quarterback, you have no chance at being good, no matter what level that you're on, no matter how strong your arm is. If you're not good with your feet, you're not going to be good at quarterback. But with Corral, he has everything that you want in the lower half. It's kind of like, and you guys have had plenty of experience with Kyler Murray. Just think of how twitchy Kyler Murray is with everything that he does. It's just that baseball background that he has. Everything's like a shortstop with Matt Corral. So the biggest learning curve for Corral is just going to be the offense that he is in. And that's just my biggest worry with him. I wouldn't say worry. I just want to see where he lands first, and then the offense that he's in, just because I think that's probably going to make or break his career, just because you have to do so much RPO with him, just because that's all he knows. And I would be hesitant with doing progression-based stuff, whether it's half field or full field reads, just because the only exposure that he has during his career is so much RPO.
I'm gonna simplify something or explain something, or actually have you explain it so I don't sound stupid. When we've mentioned the term, like you just did whole field or half field, like how would, for our audience listening or watching, that's like Jordan, Chris, what are you guys talking about? What's the difference in a whole field and like a half field read for a quarterback?
Yeah, so full field read means you have wide receivers on each side and all of them are in play. There's usually 5 total reads depending on how many eligible options that you have out on the field. Sometimes you use 6-man or 7-man protections. Sometimes you may have 2-man, 3-man, or even 4-man routes. So with full field reads, it's usually left to right or right to left, depending on the read that you want. But with half field, you cut it off in a sense. So you're just reading the right side or you're just reading the left side. So that's pretty much the difference between full field and half field reads.
See, Madden was onto something when they put the little
vision cone.
Yeah, the little vision cone.
Yeah.
Madden was honest because that really is how guys see the field.
You can literally stare down one receiver.
The problem was Michael Vick's thing was crazy small.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unless you were Michael Vick or Peyton Manning, you didn't have to move it at all because it was the whole field.
All right.
Yeah, like Peyton Manning. Yeah, I would have to turn it off with Vick. Vick was on the cover of the 04 one.
But it was a challenge to play with Vick. It felt good when you could play with him and throw darts because he could throw that ball, but the cone was just a sliver, man.
Yeah, but moving that, I was like, Vick's got to be better than this.
I think he improved throughout the year in that game.
No, if I'm Vick, I'm calling EA or whoever, like, hey, yo, I can throw the ball.
I have the accuracy. I can see the field.
Yeah, that was crazy. But stay with some of these rookies. Is Matt? I mean, it's so funny comparing Matt to Malik because I make fun of deceptive speed and how coded some of the languages with the draft. All the white guys have deceptive speed. It's just the funniest thing. Go find a white receiver in this class. Look at the comps and take a shot every time you see Braxton Berrios or Hunter Renfrow. It's so funny. But is in the sense that Malik and Matt maybe can both be used at the NFL level as not the focal point, but a heavy part of the run game and the passing game. Are they similar in that regard, Matt and Malik?
Somewhat. I think Malik is a stronger runner than Matt, but the big thing with Matt is that he just has to protect himself. That's why he's had so many durability issues and concerns. I mean, you saw it in the bowl game against Baylor of where like he's just a crash dummy that I like to call. He just throws his body into guys, and it's like, man, you're not gonna survive if you do that on the next level. And Matt's not a big guy at all. I mean, he's only about 6'1", around 205 pounds. And just seeing him in person, he's not an overly big guy at all. Now with Malik, he's built much different. He kind of has that like running back build of where he's really thick in his lower half. But with Malik, he understands how to protect himself. He gets down. But with Matt, just go watch the Tennessee game. He had 30 carries in that game.
Oh.
And yeah, he had 30 total. And it was just a crash course, a collision course. He was in a car crash the entire game. And I'm just like, man, this dude is not going to last. He's got to learn to protect himself.
He's sounding a lot like Mike Vick because he did not understand how to slide either. He would get destroyed.
Carson Wentz, too, doesn't really know how to protect himself.
Might have to get a course going, Jordan, on how to slide.
Yeah.
I want to stick with Matt here. When you watch the tape, watch the film on Matt, what stood out with you when you watched him? And then what are things that you're like, I need to see him be better at this at the next level?
Yeah, well, I'll just start with what he needs to work on. And something that I thought he got much better at is just taking care of the football. Turnovers was a big problem for him in 2020. He actually had 11 interceptions in 2 games alone. He threw 6. Yeah, he threw 6 against Arkansas, and he threw 5 against LSU. But last year, total, he threw 5 interceptions in the entire season. So he took much better care of the football and then just protecting himself like we talked about. He just has to learn to slide. Otherwise, he's not going to last. And he acknowledged that at the combine. And he said teams have been telling him that, like, man, why did you not slide? Just because you're not going to last in the NFL if you don't learn how to slide. So the durability issues is something that I think is going to continue to creep up with him if he doesn't learn how to slide. Now, what he does well, everything is quick with him. Like I keep saying that, like, it doesn't take you long to realize just how well he marries his eyes, his feet, and then also his arm. Everything is just in sync together. And then he can flip his hips in an instant. He doesn't need the laces to throw the football. He can get it out really quickly as soon as he catches it. I like to call it grip it and rip it throws. He's really good at those type of throws whenever he gets the ball. So everything is quick with him. He has really quick eyes, quick feet. And I think he's so sudden in his lower half. And I think that's going to help him a lot on the next level.
You mentioned protecting yourself, and you played quarterback. What is up with quarterbacks not realizing the magnitude of, damn, I'm going up against guys that are, linebackers at 250. Maybe I should slide here. Like, I guess I can't ask you what goes through his mind because you're not in his mind, but someone that played the game, what do you think he's thinking? Like, I can get the extra yard. What is going through their minds of, I can really make a play here when, you're risking, your career right here at this point?
He just hasn't took the wrong hit yet. That's all.
Oh.
All it takes is the wrong hit. All it takes is the wrong hit. That's all it takes.
It sucks because I don't want to say it sucks, but like you take them hits and like, boy, everybody in the locker room is gonna love you. You putting your body on the line. Them coaches slapping you on the butt.
Is it worth it though?
Yeah. Well, then you end up in the cold tub or the ambulance or the training room. Sunday morning for college players, you in there by yourself. Ain't nobody dapping you up because they don't need their ankle taped 30 times.
Right. Carson Wentz learned after he tore his ACL, taking a hit, and if you notice, he completely changed after that too.
Yeah. Well said. He hasn't taken a hit yet, Chris. Okay, all right, there it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot to learn by taking a really hard hit, as Chris Rock can probably attest. I had to slide. It was a perfect
Come on, man.
It was. Hey, man, the world's a better place when people have some consequences behind what they say. Maybe not Chris in specific, but like, hey, in general, like that's how we grew up.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, let's stick with these QBs. Let's go to Kenny, 2-glove Kenny Pickett. Maybe even what people consider the most pro-ready guy. When I read about him, hear people talk about him, it seems like it got some arm strength. He's accurate. He can anticipate throws, which I don't think we've talked much about anticipation, but that might be one of the top 3 traits you want to see as well. Can throw off platform, which John Schneider loves every day of the week and twice on Sunday if you can throw off platform. If this guy can do all that, like, he's got to be QB1, right?
I mean, yeah, for some people he will be. I still have Malik Willis ahead of him right now. The biggest issue, and I tell everybody this, that you worry about with Kenny Pickett is that is he a quarterback that you can win because I think the ceiling isn't as high as some of the other quarterbacks. So you're going to run into the issue of, do I sign this guy to the next contract just because he's probably never going to win those big time games against the Mahomes and the Josh Allens of the world and players like that. So I love my colleague Mel Kiper's comparison for him of Derek Carr. That's really the high end comparison for Kenny Pickett. But I think the low end comparison for him of who he can be is Andy Dalton. And with Andy Dalton, he'll get you to the playoffs. But the issue becomes, can he beat those teams in the playoffs? So I think that's always going to be the issue with Kenny. I think he has B-level arm strength right now, and he's the most experienced of the bunch. He's played in 52 career games. He has 49 career starts, so he has plenty of starts to his credit. But there's some things from a ceiling perspective that I worry about with him right now.
That makes him an interesting prospect for someone like Seattle. If he lasts beyond the Panthers at 6, let's assume he does, because Pete will tell you that I don't even need him to go to battle with Mahomes. Like Pete saw that Josh Allen Mahomes duel in the playoffs and was like, I mean, that's cute, but like, did you guys see how what's my name's man in New England, the rookie they just had,
Mac Jones?
Yeah, like, did you see Mac Jones only throw it 3 times and win a game? Like, that's kind of, I swear that's like Pete's mind. So he's actually cool with a guy who maybe you win with, because he feels, whether this is accurate or not, he has all the tools to win with, like run game, defense. Again, there's some holes in that argument. That's his thought process. If let's say the Panthers are like, we don't need Kenny at 6, and Pete Carroll sees a guy in Kenny that he can win with, is that too high of a pick for Seattle for Kenny?
I mean, I think the Panthers are going to have an interest in him at 6. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes in the top 10 just because of the experience that he has. And it's kind of like, and I love using other sports analogies of Malik Willis is that home run swing. Like, you're swinging for the fences. You have no idea what's going to come of it, but you're going to go up there and you're going to try. With Kenny Pickett, it's kind of like you're attempting to get on second or third base. So you're trying to get a double or a triple, but you know that you're going to get on base. And I mean, that's the best way that I can put it between the two. You're just aiming to get on base with him. He's going to come in. He's going to be pro ready. He's going to know where to go with the football. He's going to be accurate. He's going to digest the playbook and be very good at it. But the thing about that type of model is that it's just not sustainable. And that was my big worry with Mac Jones, of where you can have a strong running game, you can have a good defense, but eventually your quarterback has to make plays. And while that may work for 1 to 2 years, if you want to have sustained success, you're always going to worry about having that type of quarterback, just because you're not always going to have a good defense. You're not always going to have a good running game. So that quarterback is eventually going to have to make some type of plays. And I'm with Pete as far as if he's just trying to win a game or two with that type of model. But if we're talking about sustained success over 5 to 6 years or even more, I just don't think that type of model is sustainable.
Chris, just so you know, those were baseball references. I know you don't watch any baseball at all. Did you know? Did you know that baseball was on?
Yeah,
already? You knew. Okay,
knew.
Chris
Yes.
watches no baseball whatsoever.
Can you blame me, Jordan?
I mean, I have to be physically at the ballpark to watch baseball. I just can't watch it on TV. I'm not a big fan of low scoring sports. Soccer, baseball, on
Hockey.
TV, I should say. On TV, I just can't watch it.
No, I hear you on that. I'm gonna get to my quarterback. All right, Sam.
We're here. Your guy now.
We're gonna go
All
to
right.
Sam Howell. Okay, and I think he's exciting. There's some things that stood out to me, and I'm like, okay, I like it. But when you flipped on the tape and you watch Sam, what are some things that you're like, I like about this guy? And then here are some things that he needs to work on, kind of like you did with Corral.
Yeah, so I'll just start with the negatives first. And very similar to Corral, he played in very RPO-oriented offense, of where everything was either go ball or it was slants over the middle of the field. But he has the quick feet that you're looking for, has a very strong arm. I think he's the best deep ball thrower of any quarterback in this draft. And just having experience with seeing Sam, I was able to see him live, and I was at his pro day too. I mean, he throws a beautiful football. Like, the ball comes out of his hand with plenty of energy. He's very accurate, and he knows where to go with the ball. But once again, different type of footwork in that offense. And then also the thing that I think happened to Sam early on in the year, he lost his top 4 weapons and his 2 running backs, Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, and then also his 2 perimeter weapons, and De'Ami Brown, and then also Daz Newsome. So like Malik Willis, he was just trying to do way too much just because he was learning new weapons. He was trying to get acclimated to those guys. He just didn't have any chemistry with them early on, just because he had so much success with those 4 guys. And whenever you lose what was 97% of their offense,
Oof.
that's just really, really hard to overcome. So he just took too much onus on his shoulders, of where he was just trying to do way, way too much. That's what happened against Virginia Tech in the season opener, where he threw 3 interceptions, I believe it was. And then he just didn't really overcome any of that until about midseason. But I thought he played well down the backstretch of the year, just because he understood, like, hey, I don't have to do all of that like I'm trying to do. But where he did improve was his ability to run the football. I think that was an adjustment that they made of where that's a lot of production that you lose in the backfield. And Ty Chandler's a good player. I like Ty Chandler, but he wasn't Michael Carter and Javonte Williams for that offense. But with Sam, in the first 2 years of his career, he had 180 rushing yards combined in 2 years. Last year, he had over 850 rushing yards. That just goes to show you that he was much more acclimated and involved in a designed quarterback run game. And that's something that he admitted that he enjoyed doing, but that's not a part of his game that he wants to be on the next level just because he wants to throw the football. So I think with him, it was just a matter of accepting what he had to do in the offense, and he wasn't able to overcome some of that or playing some of that hero ball early on. But as far as throwing the football, I think he has it.
There we go. 10 years ago, the Seahawks, they took Bruce Irving in the first round, traded up to get him, that is, Bobby in the second round, and then they went Russ in the third. With Sam Howell and Matt Corral being second, third round options, does it look like the Seahawks are going to try to get these guys in the later rounds, considering if they do, in fact, like what they're bringing to the table, which is the quote-unquote game manager?
I think Seattle's in a perfect spot to take either one of those guys at 40 or 41, and even having those picks back to back, you could trade up in the back end of the first round and get one of those guys that you're targeting. Just because I think somehow was going to be there. I don't know about Corral just because he's really, really hard to get a gauge on Corral's draft stock right now, just because we haven't seen him a whole bunch. And if you think about it, we've seen all these guys in the pre-draft process. All of them played in the Senior Bowl. We didn't get to see Corral in the Senior Bowl. Obviously, he wasn't eligible for it, but we saw Howell, we saw Ridder, we saw Willis, we saw all these guys. Carson Strong, we even seen him a whole bunch throughout the process. So Corral's really hard to get a gauge on right now, but Howell, I think he's one that could go much earlier than what a lot of people are predicting right now. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes in the first round. It wouldn't surprise me if he goes in the second round, or even if he lasts into the third round. That's just how crazy this quarterback class is. So, I mean, I like Howell. I like him a lot, actually. But it's just a matter of, once again, the offense and the situation that he goes to, and just understanding what he had to overcome early on. And I think a lot of people aren't really taking that into account when they're grading Sam Howell too.
That's fair.
Do quarterbacks have smaller pads than everyone else, right? Do I have that correct? Yeah. I'm sorry. You've said some numbers that have just kind of made the throwing. What do you do? 12. Somebody threw 11 picks in 2 games.
Yeah, that
Corral.
was.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the other number was just now was at 97% of the offense or something like that
Gone.
they lost. The other one was rushing it 30 times against Tennessee when you got smaller pads than everybody else. Like, there's some. If I'd have had, that was Corral, right?
Yep.
If I'd have had Corral in the room at the combine, that might have been the first thing. I'm like, boy, I wouldn't call him boy. Like, young man, what the hell were you thinking? You're running it 30 times against an SEC. You run 30 times against, like, I don't know. Give me some
Idaho
school. Yeah, Idaho. Yeah, you don't run it
You
30
don't even
times.
do that. You shouldn't have to play after the third quarter against Idaho.
As someone who has watched a lot of Idaho football,
see what I did there for you, Mike?
No, I watched them lose to Florida State. I watched them lose to USC. I've watched them lose some pretty bad games. Yeah, you should. I've watched them lose to Auburn. Yeah, 30 times in the SEC. I wouldn't even want my running back doing that. To be
That's dangerous.
No, that is brutal. What I mentioned anticipation.
Woo.
Good God.
I was wondering, is Mike got a new word?
I know. I'm sober, ladies and gentlemen. Just to make that clear. Just in terms of that specific trait, I'm not even going to try to mess the word up. Who's maybe the best with that in this class?
That's a really good question. I think Ridder and then also Pickett. I think those two. I should say all those guys are good at it. Outside of Willis, I think those guys really have a lot of experience as far as at anticipatory throws. That's what I like to call them. But I mean, all these guys are really good with anticipation. But Ridder and Pickett are probably the two best of the bunch right now. Howell more so in the RPO run pass option game, just because he has so much experience doing it. You can see him testing some of those second window throws and throwing behind the heads and the ears of those safeties quite a bit. So I don't really count that as anticipatory throws. I can't say it either. Mike rubbing off on me trying to say that word. But yeah, I think Ridder and also Pickett, I think they're probably the two best of the bunch of those anticipation throws.
Is that something that can improve? Just like I asked about accuracy, can you get better at anticipation? There you go. See, I got it that time.
Yeah, it's just all about comfort with that, just because in order to anticipate, you have to know where guys are going to be. If you don't know where guys are going to be, you can't anticipate where they're going to be. So once they understand the playbook, they understand processing and reading coverages where guys are going to be. It's just a matter of just knowing where they're going to be in order to make those type of anticipation throws.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, we didn't. We're focused on our rookies, but that was really my. I'm gonna ask you about him just right now. I know we didn't plan on it, but that's kind of my big issue when I go back and watch some of Drew Lock. Like I find
Yeah.
myself yelling at my laptop, like, "Hey, yo, Drew, he there?" And then I was like, "Oh, well, now you see it." But now the defender has it. Now, Drew, you see that? Now we lost the ball. And I'm seeing that in 2019. I'm seeing that in 2020. I didn't watch much of his 2021. But when you were assuming you looked at him coming out in 2019, is that what you saw as well?
Yeah, there were quite a few issues with Drew Lock, and I think that's why he ended up slipping to the second round as a very, very strong arm. I mean, Drew is very gifted as far as being able to throw the football, as far as distance, accuracy is something that he's always struggled with. He's always hovered around that 60 percentile range, 60% range, I should say, as far as accuracy. He even had some years of where he was in the 50s at Mizzou. And then another issue with Lock is that for whatever reason, he just fades away on all of his throws. And I have no idea. I think it's just a bad habit that he created at some point in his life. He just doesn't step into a lot of his throws. And you guys will notice it whenever you see him next year that he just fades away for unnecessary reasons. And with that, it just puts so much pressure on his arm. And he's sacrificial with his accuracy when he's not stepping into his throws. And if you kind of think of a pitcher stepping off of a mound or pitching off of a mound, that strong lead leg going into throwing the ball off of the mound, that lead leg is where you get your accuracy. If you fall back off of that lead leg, just think of a pitcher throwing the ball and then just fading away from the mound. You just have no idea where the ball is going to go. So that's how you get your ball placement with him. So that's why I think he's always been an inaccurate passer, just because he fades away on so many of his throws.
Man,
It's not basketball out here, man.
No, well, it kind of does sound like basketball with the fadeaway, but it makes sense because Drew wears a shooting sleeve, which is, I mean, I think it's cool, but I'm like, at the same time, it's like you
Keep
can't.
your elbow on.
Yeah, like, hold on, man. You wearing a shooting sleeve? It's football. You fading away. You throwing interceptions. These dudes on 20 interceptions. I think 21 starts. That's just way too much. You've given us some pro comps with some of these guys. I like the Derek Carr ish comp. You got a comp for? I don't know if you gave us one for Sam Howell. Do you have one for him?
I mean, everybody's going to use Baker Mayfield, and I think that one is pretty fair.
Mike doesn't like Baker.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of Baker coming
okay,
out.
no,
I need to defend
But
that.
as far as just like the mannerisms, the build, I mean, I see it, and I don't have one that I'm like fully comfortable with. And I think something else a lot of people have to understand about comps is that it's not necessarily just projecting who they're going to be on the next level. I just think there's some little playing styles and takeaways that they have as far as the traits or the attributes that are similar. I think that's where a lot of people, that's why I say using comps is such a slippery slope. If you go out here and you say, oh, this guy's DK Metcalf, they're automatically going to assume he's going to turn into one of the best young receivers in the league. But no, you're just saying that he has a lot of similar qualities and he plays like DK. So I think that's what is kind of a slippery slope once again when you're comparing Sam to Baker Mayfield, when in reality, we're just saying that he has a lot of similar qualities that Baker had walking through the door in the NFL.
So he kind of,
I was going to say he looked like Baker.
I just pulled up his picture. I know everybody on YouTube
looks just like him, man.
Yeah, he kind of looked like, but I didn't really know what a lot of these guys look like. It's like when I asked that question about Matt and Malik both maybe being part of the run game, I was like, hold on, let me make sure. Is Matt Corral white? And he is. But
yes.
You never, I mean, I don't watch a lot of college football, so I did see Matt hurt his ankle.
Sam Howell is actually Korean, believe it or not.
Whoa.
Oh.
What?
Yeah. Never judge a book by its cover.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I follow Mina Kimes. How do I not know that? She shouts out every Asian ever. That's crazy. Wow.
We learn something new every day.
No, we do. That's what happens when we have somebody who's like studied this more than we do. Chris said I don't like Baker. That's not true.
Not entirely true.
My thing with Seahawks fans who ask me should they trade for him, apprehension is maybe the better vocabulary word to use there, is that I think in 2020 Baker had the most ideal setup that's comparable to what Seattle wanted. They ran the ball at a really high level and had two running backs doing it. They had a really good offensive line, perhaps one of the best in football. Their defense was at least decent enough. It wasn't Legion of Boom, and that's why they made the playoffs. And then Baker still ain't the guy. Like in those ideal circumstances, if you were not the guy in that, you're going to come here with a not as good offensive line, perhaps a not as good run game, and a not as good defense. You really ain't going to be the guy over here. So I'm not going to pay you $18 million to not be the guy over here if you were barely the guy over there. That's all. I like Baker's attitude and how he kicks it. You know,
like his commercials.
I don't even see none of his commercials. I saw him with he had his draws out and he was next to a tiger in some ad. I don't really know what that was about. I don't know. But that's I don't dislike Baker. It's funny just now he wants out. Everybody wants out of Cleveland. It's just crazy.
Makes sense.
We're going to put you on the spot, Jordan. We know you're an NFL draft analyst for ESPN, doing big things over there. But right now, we're going to give you a promotion. You are now the general manager of the Seahawks for the all intents and purposes right now. And you need to take a quarterback. Doesn't really matter what round. Just say, hey, Jordan, we need a quarterback. Like, we can't do the Drew Lock thing. Can't do the Geno Smith thing. We can't do the Jacob Eason thing. We need a quarterback. You're the GM of the Seahawks right now. Who are they taking, and what round do they take him in?
Well, I mean, if Malik Willis is there at 9, I would take him just because he's the one in this group that I would feel the most comfortable taking in the first round. Now, with Seattle situation, I would like to bring in a veteran to be ahead of him just because I wouldn't feel comfortable with Drew Lock being that guy. I think Malik would eventually outplay him in camp. I think it would be a no-brainer, honestly, who should start between the two. So I would look to bring in some type of veteran competition potentially to add ahead of him just because I don't think he's going to be ready. Now, if you use those 2 second-round picks on offensive linemen, that could change the outlook of a lot of things. But I just think you need to have that veteran in front of him just because he's not going to be ready. Now, with Seattle, I think with what Pete wants to do as far as a strong running game, already having the weapons, I think Malik definitely fits in really well with that offense. But just speaking with imaginary terms right here, I don't know what's going to happen with that as far as how they're going to use those 2 second-rounders and then what's going to happen at the QB1 spot. But if Malik is there at 9, I mean, I would run the card in really, really fast. I think it would be a really good fit in Seattle if they sign a veteran in front of them.
Okay.
I mean, I think the thing that we have to remember about the NFL draft in this time of year is that when it comes to predicting what the Seahawks will do, no one knows anything.
No,
it's impossible.
We don't know shit. We really, and I'm proud of that. Yeah, because I don't want to pretend.
So it makes it fun. I'll never forget the LJ Collier pick. That was one of the most surprising things that I ever seen.
Okay,
and they've been doing that for 3 years
consistently.
Let's exclude the D. Eskridge pick, but I did not think they were going to take Rashad Penny. I did not think. I thought they were going to take LJ Collier. I mocked him to them, but I think at pick 46. Or whatever pick they had maybe later, not at 29, whatever they had. And then the year they took Jordan Brooks, I'm like, all right, that's not really. I threw my hands up like, hey,
I don't know.
I give up, y'all.
John, nobody predicted
Jordan Brooks. Where's okay? Oh, interesting. All right.
One more thing on Malik before we get you out of here. Is he the guy most likely of this class to be the quarterback that you win because of?
Yeah, I think so, just because of the upside. And if you think about it, all the quarterbacks that have had success in the league, whether it's Herbert or Burrow, Josh Allen, in the sense of where you have to have some type of mobility walking through the door. Just because if you think about the ones that haven't worked out, whether it's Dwayne Haskins or Josh Rosen, some of these more traditional pocket passers, I think those type of quarterbacks are pretty much starting to become extinct. And I know Mac Jones, he's kind of holding the candle right now as far as being that type of guy. But just think about some of the players that have already had success in that draft class. I think Trevor's going to be better next year. Fields is going to get an opportunity to play as a full-time starter this year. And Trey Lance, we'll see what does happen with that. But as far as the quarterbacks that have had the most success early on right away, they've had some type of mobility. That's why I would feel comfortable with guys like Malik and Ridder and then even Pickett in a sense. But I just think that's one of the prerequisites that you have to have. And I actually use that in my grades now, where if you don't have any type of mobility, it's just so hard for you to win in today's day and age in the NFL. Yeah,
I think that's kind of an antiquated skill set to be a I can't remember from the Patriots' name.
Mac Jones.
Goodness. Yeah, to be a Mac Jones. Who? Even Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, those guys thrive. Even Phillip Rivers, you just can't be that now. You just can't. I need you to at least be able to slide and get out the way and then throw that joint 40 yards. If you can't do that, I can't take you in any round.
Can't do nothing with you.
Yeah, because you're gonna die.
That's why I think a guy like Carson Strong, I just have no idea where he's gonna go in his draft class, just because he's a traditional pocket passer, and then also he has the knee issues too. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him, but then I was like, he's a pocket passer. That's
from Nevada. Right?
Yeah, that's the last in the Seahawks when a guy that's just stationary, can't move.
Yeah,
he can throw, he can rip the ball, but if you can't move, that's just a problem in the offense.
Yeah. Well, the
Seahawks offense.
I contend right now. I mean, we don't have to do a whole argument on this, but I think the defensive ends in the NFL are about the freakiest athletes on the field. on any given snap.
They just
like
saw a guy that's I think in high school or college running a 4 or a 10-3 in the 100.
I'm talking about just specifically in the NFL. Like the first time I seen Frank Clark in practice, I was like, "There's no way he's not the best athlete on the team."
Oh yeah,
like he could, like in terms of just quick twitch, bend,
strength,
physical strength, jump in. Like I was and just I was like, Frank Clark's the best athlete on the team. This is like 2018. Like this is insane. And you look at like who's the best edge rusher in the league right now?
Probably
Myles Garrett.
Miles Garrett. That was TJ Watt. Yeah.
TJ Watt and Myles Garrett look like pro wrestlers. Like
well, we just saw him hooping. He was over here dunking and going crazy.
Oh yeah, Miles was in the celebrity game.
Yeah, he was looking. Yeah, give him the ball.
Those guys are
built like an action figure, man. That
yeah. Miles Garrett looked like a Spartan. Like if you can't run away from him, you're gonna die. Pretty much.
Very well
That's
said.
To go back to the QB mobility. If you can't get away from him, you can't just rely on your left tackle to get because he's gonna get thrown to the ground.
Right.
You know. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Jordan Reid, NFL draft analyst for ESPN. Does such great work, man. Like I need to give Chris my ESPN login so you can read the
see
stuff,
everything. Because I was like, oh,
because it's great work, man. Like I rely on you to like remember. You know how I was kind of saying during the show, like, oh yeah, according to what I've read, I'm just reading you. I'm reading you. I'm reading Dane Brugler. PFF's draft guide has been kind of useful. I'm glad.
Danny Kelly.
Yeah, I'm glad Danny Kelly, the Ringer. Shout out to Danny. I'm glad, but just like I don't read that many people. I like keep it pretty tight. People I trust. People I think know what the hell they're talking about. So everybody, please, if you're listening right now, where can they follow you on Twitter, Jordan? Let's do that.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Jordan, that's JORDAN _Reid, REID. Have stuff on ESPN Plus and also ESPN.com posting every week. Pretty much myself, my colleagues, Matt Miller, then also Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. We have stuff going up every week. I actually have a 7-round mock draft, all 262 picks going up next week. So Seahawks fans, you will have plenty to talk crap to me about next week. I'm looking forward to that, as well as all other 32 fan bases. Be on SportsCenter, Get Up, all that other stuff from now up until the draft. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we see you on TV. Smiling.
Oh yeah.
No,
I talked to Jordan. I've been watching TV. He came on the TV. I was at my grandma's house. I was like, Granny, you know that guy right there? She's like, oh, you know him? I do that with Cam Wolf at NFL Network too. I'd be like, Granny, you know, he was at my birthday party because Cam kicked it with me for my birthday last year.
Cam's a good dude, man.
Oh yeah, man. Super great, guys. Thank you, Jordan.
Appreciate
you, man. Thank you guys for all tuning into the Seahawks Man to Man podcast. We're gonna keep it going, man. We're gonna dive into all this stuff. We're gonna break down every position group we can. Me and Chris are gonna pretend we know what we're talking about while we bring in experts to fill in the gaps there. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, The Athletic, whatever you gotta do. Thank you so much for all the support and the love. On that note, y'all, we out.